Why did the people who knew Jesus best seem to believe in him least? In this 37th video on Mark's Gospel, we'll find out. We're exploring Mark chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. Look at verse 1 from the English Standard Version of the Bible. He went away from there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. Went away from where? Mark chapter 5 ended at Jairus' house, after Jesus raised his daughter from the dead. After that event, Jesus and his close disciples headed to his hometown, Nazareth. What do we know about Nazareth? It was a tiny town, populated by between 200 and 400 mostly Jewish people. It had little to no industry, and most people labored for subsistence. It's so small and insignificant that it isn't mentioned in the Old Testament at all. So what? Nobody would expect that God's Messiah would come from a dinky little blue-collar town. They were waiting for a warrior king, like David. Let's move on to verse 2. And on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? What is the wisdom given to him? How are such mighty works done by his hands?" Jesus engaged in his normal practice. He went to synagogue on the Sabbath, and he was teaching. Mark has described Jesus doing this multiple times so far. And how was he received? Many of the people were astonished, and based on what they said about him, they seem to think that his words and deeds don't make sense coming from a fellow Nazarene. People in their little town don't know these things, possess such wisdom, and perform such mighty deeds. On to verse 3. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. They clearly know who Jesus is, and his occupation. They know his mom and his 4 brothers by name. They know his sisters, too. So, what is at the heart of their question? He isn't acting in keeping with their expectations. He's acting like someone with great knowledge, wisdom, and power, and not like the carpenter who grew up with them here in Nazareth. Who does he think he is? Why doesn't he keep his head down and act like the rest of us? Then Mark tells us, they took offense at him. The word translated took offense gives us the English word scandalized, and means they were caused to stumble by what Jesus said and did. If a stranger came from Jerusalem and said the same things and performed the same miracles, they would probably accept him. But they can't accept it from a local man. How did Jesus respond? Look at verse 4. And Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown, and among his relatives, and in his own household." What Jesus said to them is not a biblical quote, or even a known quote from extra-biblical literature. It's believed to be a common Jewish saying derived from several Old Testament accounts. Let's quickly consider a few. In Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 21, Jeremiah's townspeople threaten him for prophesying in the Lord's name. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 10, Elijah laments, "The Israelites have rejected your covenant and killed your prophets." And in 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 16, it says, "They mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets." When and where did Jesus make his statement? In the synagogue on the Sabbath. The audience is Jewish and knows Old Testament history. By making this proverbial statement, he is alluding to the long history of God's people rejecting God's messengers. And according to Jesus, they're doing it again. Let's move on to verses 5 and 6. And he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. And he went about among the villages teaching. Look at the first phrase. And he could do no mighty work there. Is Mark saying that Jesus' miraculous power is dependent on the location? Not at all. A theme in Mark's Gospel has been the correlation of the openness and interest of people in Jesus' message and how much time he spends with them, and how many miracles they see. When he arrived in the Decapolis, cast out the legion of demons that then killed the 2,000 pigs, the people of the area asked him to leave, and he did. Jesus won't stay where he's rejected. Mark tells us that Jesus marveled because of the unbelief of the people in his hometown. Usually, people are described as astonished by Jesus, or marveled at what he said and did. But now, he marvels at their unbelief. What did Jesus do about it? He left Nazareth and returned to his regular pattern of going town to town and teaching those who wanted to hear him. So what can we learn from this story? On 2 prior occasions, Mark told us that Jesus' mother and brothers had tried to get him to stop his public ministry. They thought he was out of his mind, that he was acting outside of what would be proper for a carpenter from a tiny town. Now, much of his hometown seems to have that same opinion. Familiarity breeds contempt and warps expectations. Imagine what you might miss because of your preconceived notions and expectations. In our next video, Jesus sends the disciples out on a mission. Thank you for watching So What Scripture. Please subscribe to the channel and share this video.